Thank you, thank you. So I actually want everyone to come in even closer. So ladies over here, if you guys could just kind of fill in. We all love each other, right? So I don't want any spaces between chairs. Just move on down. Move on down. Touch, love. Yes. You ladies over there, come on.
Team family.
Yes. Team family. That's right. Thank you for the introduction, Allie. If you guys don't already, you should follow Allie on Instagram because her Instagram is so awesome. She does hand letters, quotes, and Bible verses and things like that, and they're really awesome. So I am really excited to speak with you ladies this morning. One, because you guys are just so beautiful. Look at yourselves. It's amazing. I'm in awe. And because I'm really passionate about what it means to be a woman. And I feel like, as Allie was speaking last night, showing us the video of her, of levels. But when we think about what Jesus said to her, you have no husband, right? It's pretty common back then that you would get married and your spouse would die. Wah, wah. And he said, you've had 5 husbands. So we can assume that maybe she was widowed 5 times. When a woman had a spouse pass away, she was pretty desolate. And so the choices were really either get married, die of hunger, or become a prostitute. And so we see that she chose to remarry. That's the best option of the 3, right? Probably 5 times. And then Jesus says, but the one you are with now is not your husband. So what does that mean? That after the 5th marriage, she didn't choose marriage again, right? She chose something else. And then I love her response. So she asked Jesus for this living water. And she tells him, I know the Messiah is coming. And he's going to explain all of this to us. And Jesus says, that's me. I am he who you are speaking with. And she goes into the city, right? Her response to Jesus, she meets him. I just think of the way that he loved her. Think of what you would experience. You're this woman in the desert by yourself at the well. It's the middle of the day, you're hot. And you see this man, and probably she was scared when she first saw him. He's there, she's there in the middle of the day because she can't come in the morning or at night because she's presumably a prostitute. And so nobody will deal with her. And this Jew comes along who's a higher status than she is, and he speaks to her. And he asks her for something. And he offers her living water. But she doesn't quite get it, right? She's not really sure. She's like, how can you give me living water? You don't even have a bucket. You can't get any, you're asking me to get something out of the well for you. But then he tells her who he is. And her response is that she goes into the city and she says, come and see a man who told me everything I'd ever done. Everything I'd ever done. So Jesus knows in that moment that she is a sinner, right? I'm a sinner. He knows that. He knows that I mess up. And he loves me anyway, with the love of a father. So I want to talk a little bit about women, obviously. That's why we're here, right? But specifically what we were made for, and a specifically feminine virtue that I've spent the last 10 years trying to cultivate, unsuccessfully most of the time. But it's this virtue of receptivity. I think men in our world have a much greater challenge in learning how to be loved by God because God calls them as men to submit to him, right, to receive from him, and then at the same time to lead a spouse or the church if they're called to the priesthood. So they have this dual role, right? They have to submit to God and then lead a spouse or the church. We as women, we have it a little bit easier because all we have to do is learn how to receive. And if we can learn how to receive, then we will be exactly where God wants us. And so when I say receive, what do I mean by that? We are called to receive the love of God, obviously, but it's not passive. There's a difference between passivity and receptivity. Reception is like an active acceptance of the gift of God. And if you think about us anatomically, ladies, like our bodies were made to receive, right? Like think about your biology. Our bodies can do what only a woman's body can do, which is bear life, bear a child, co-create with God. But to do that, we have to receive from a man, right? Does everyone get what I'm talking about? Okay, just want to make sure, right? Like we're on the same page. I don't need to beat a dead horse. We're made to receive. Like our bodies are physically made to receive, and that our bodies show us something about our souls in a lot of ways. So things that you're told, whether it's in the media or from people at school or maybe from your friends and family, I hope not, but we're constantly told that we're not enough, right? You're constantly told that at the same time you're not enough, but you're also too much, right? You're too tall, you're too short, you're too fat, you're too skinny, your hair's too long, it's too short, it's too dark, it's too light. You're too smart, or you're too dumb, or you're too loud, or you're too quiet, or you're too funny, right? Like we're always told these lies. But the truth is that you're exactly enough. You are enough because you are made by a God who loves you, and he had you in mind when he created the world. You know, a lot of people will point to the fact that Adam was made first, right? Adam and Eve, right? Adam came first. And they'll say like, okay, well, that means like women are inferior. It's not true. Because you see, there's an ascending order of importance in creation. When God starts the creation of the world, he makes inanimate things, right? He makes the heavens and the earth, like he separates the land from the sea. And then he makes plants. And then he makes animals. And then he makes man from dust. But woman, he makes woman from man. Adam was created in the image and likeness of God. But then he creates woman from someone who was made in the image and likeness of God. So he takes dust and makes Adam. He breathes into Adam. And man is made. But then he says, I have one more trick up my sleeve. And he makes woman. He makes you. So there's this quote I love by Venerable Fulton Sheen. He was an archbishop here in the United States not too long ago. And he says, the level of society is the level of its womanhood. I'll say it again. The level of society is the level of its womanhood. Why do you think that is? I think it's because there's a basic difference in knowing something and loving something. Do I have any musicians in the room? Anyone in band or orchestra, right? How about any linguists? Like anyone study foreign languages, right? So when you know something, you bring it down to your understanding. But when you love something, you submit to the demands of the one loved, right? So you musicians, you know that you can't just sit down and start playing random notes. There has to be an order. There has to be a method. And that's the law of music, right? Music theory, if you've ever taken music theory, there's chords and progressions and all these things, right, that you have to submit to. Same with foreign languages. You can't just translate word for word from English to whatever language you speak, right? You have to submit yourself to the laws of the language in order for things to make sense. And so when we understand something, we bring it down to our level, but when we love something, we rise up to meet the demands of the one loved. So when a man loves a woman, the nobler the woman, the nobler the love. the higher the demands of the woman, the more worthy a man must be to receive that love. So going back to the story of creation, right? In the beginning, there was perfect harmony in the garden, right? We know the story. Adam and Eve partake of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and ultimately sin enters the world. And through that process, Adam and Eve turn their back on God, but they also create tension between themselves, between each other. So there's this competing tension between man and woman, but also between each of us and our own souls. So we are called through our baptism to try to overcome that broken relationship. God had a plan from the beginning to bring us back into the peace and harmony that Adam and Eve experienced in the garden before the fall. And that plan involved Mary, the new Eve, who, where Eve said no, Mary said yes. Where sin entered the world by a tree, Jesus paid the price on a different tree. So the new Adam pays the price for the sin that enters the world, but that death on the cross requires a response from us. Just like the woman at the well, we have to do something. When we meet Jesus, we have to respond. Jesus spends 30 quiet years in a carpentry shop with Joseph, just growing in virtue and becoming a man. And after 30 years, he goes out and he finds the disciples and spends 3 years with them. And even after 3 years, some of them still weren't able to respond in love to him, right? They turned their back on him. Peter, Judas. But Jesus steps in to take the punishment from our sin. And when one drop of his blood would have been enough to bring us back into that harmony and that peace that we experienced in the garden before the fall, when one drop would have been enough, he shed it all. Every last drop. And he did it out of love for you and for me, because he sees you. And he hears you. And he chooses you. Jesus is a gentleman, unlike most men that I've ever dated. And he doesn't force himself on us. He's not going to say, you have to make a commitment to me. He's not going to say that. But he invites and he proposes. But his proposal, we have to receive it, right? We have to be receptive of that proposal, and we have to say yes. Or no. That's an option. But he always waits. He offers a gift. He offers the gift of salvation through his death. And we have to say yes. We have to receive it. And so we're going to listen to a song, and then we'll have some time for small groups or Q&A. But just listen to the song with me. Lord is... So one of the lines in that song that I just love is where she says, "I watched you carve streets of gold from the sand and gravel." And I can second and third and fourth what you've heard so many times this weekend, that life with Jesus is an amazing adventure. Your life will never be the same if you say yes to Jesus. And it will be so different from what you might have planned for yourself, but in all the best ways. And so I just would invite you to consider that. What does it mean to be receptive to the love of God? What does it mean to be chosen by the God who made the universe and thought it would be better with you in it? And what does that mean for our relationships with our brothers? Right? Like, as ladies, I know because I've been in your seat where, you know, I'm dating someone and I'm like, man, is he into me? Is he not into me? Like, how will I know? Like, I want him to want me physically and emotionally and spiritually and all these things, right? But so many times I just remember thinking, like, I wish someone loved me enough to not make me be the one that always says no, right? When things are getting hot and heavy and I have to constantly be the one that says, no, stop, this is it, this is it, right? I want that for you guys. I want you guys to be in relationship with someone who loves you so much that he wants your purity. And he wants to allow you to be receptive to whatever God wants for you. And that can be clouded by so many things, and we can talk about that in small group. But I'll leave you with this. Jesus sees you. He hears you. He loves you. And he chooses you. Thanks for your time. Yes. Yes, it's called For Love of You by Audrey Assad. The House You're Building is the album that it's on, and it's amazing. It was her first album. She's released several since, but it's awesome. Okay, so let's split up into small groups and have some conversations. It wasn't originally in the plan, but I think it'll be helpful.